alone! Ah!
In my last video, I gave you all my analysis and overall opinion of the canon portion of the Soul Eater anime, which I was already familiar with, in an attempt to answer the self-imposed question of was the Soul Eater anime really that bad? Of course, I can't really answer that question without seeing the rest of the damn show, so today I'm traveling into completely uncharted territory, episodes 39 through 51 of the Soul Eater anime, and seeing if the ending is truly as bad as I've been told. By the way, if you haven't caught on yet, this is part 2 of a mini-series, so if you have not seen the first part, I highly suggest you watch it, link in the description. I'll also be trying my hardest to treat these episodes as their own entity, separate from the Soul Eater manga, so my bias doesn't cloud my judgment. Enough with the stalling, let's get right to it. The last 12 episodes of the Soul Eater anime are split into 2 arcs, so instead of doing arc-wide reviews, I'm going to go episode by episode for this video. Before we get to those 2 arcs, however, I need to talk about episode 39 real quick, which I skipped in part 1 because this episode is entirely non-canon. Despite being so, I actually really liked this episode. It's entirely focused on Krona, who I think has an amazing adaptation in the canon part of the anime, and even in an anime original setting, they're done very well. There's a lot I like here, so I can't really complain just yet. Episode 40 is the first episode of the Operation Capture Baba Yaga Castle arc, and despite being able to very clearly sense this is an original script, I actually really enjoyed this episode. Everyone for the most part is still acting in character, and the things like the music and visuals are still on point. I do think there's a section in the episode where an ongoing joke drags for slightly too long, and it kinda just destroys my focus for a second. And another thing that I don't really quite get is whatever the hell is happening between Arachne and Ashura right now. In the manga, and the anime for that fact, it's explained that Ashura is extremely paranoid and untrustworthy, even to the point of eating his own weapon partner, and I'd like to know why he's all of a sudden snuggled up with Arachne when that's supposed to be meat. I mean, when he only just met her in the episode prior. I think this is the only instance of someone being out of character so far, and I hope it stays that way. Episode 41 makes me think I spoke too soon. This episode is very visually impressive in the Stein portion, and that's it. Like I said, I'm trying my absolute hardest to separate the manga and the anime, but I just can't when it comes to 2 certain characters. And those characters are, to be exact, Joe Butataki and Blackstar, who's actually been out of character since episode 38. Joe is just the shell of his manga self here and kind of annoying. His coffee gag got old in the episode he was introduced, and if I hear the name Uncle Bob one more time, I'm going to fucking snap. One thing I didn't mention in this video is that I'm writing each of these sections directly after watching the episode, so if anything I assume now ends up being wrong, it will be corrected later. But I really hate what they did to Joe here. He was such a short-lived but effective character in the manga, so to see him turn into a bit of a joke here really hurts. Another thing I'm starting to notice is that some of the jokes here aren't that good and run on for too long. It feels like they're trying to replicate humor from earlier in Soul Eater, like stuff from Blackstar during the Super Rin exam, or Kid in this fight on the Runaway Express, and they just don't hit the same and sometimes pull me out of the episode entirely. Thus far, I can definitely start to feel the loss of Okubo's writing and storytelling. Episode 42 is certainly an episode of Soul Eater. Things are happening, and I don't know why they're happening or when they were planned to even happen. The actual operation to capture Baba Yaga Castle starts without warning, kind of, and we get a scene of Soul and Maka talking, and Soul's like, "Maka, you gotta sleep, we need to be ready for tomorrow." And then we just cut to the next morning and Spirit is giving a speech in front of the whole school talking about how fucking dangerous this mission is and how they're all gonna die or something. So it kinda gave me a bit of whiplash. Like, I know Medusa told Death that Ashura was at Baba Yaga Castle, but for it to happen like 2 episodes later is crazy with no setup. It also seems like they're going to try to kill Ashura with everybody being as strong as they were back when he was first revived, and that worries me because they got absolutely destroyed by him after being sealed for such a long time. I'm also gonna stop pointing out when people are out of character from here on out, but one thing I noticed is that Soul is weirdly in character this episode. And by weirdly, I mean he's not like the Soul that's been in the anime thus far, but he's a slightly more analytical, mature, and level-headed character, much like he is a bit later in the manga. I guess they did this to balance out Maka, who was slightly out of character here. It's nothing actually bad, but I don't think Maka would have to think twice about breaking formation and going to help Krona and Stein, considering she also broke formation to fight Krona in the anniversary celebration arc. Also, Stein is with Medusa now, I guess. That definitely upsets me, but talking about it would extend this video's length by at least another 5 minutes, and I'd have to break my own rule and talk about the manga again, so I'll let this decision cook and see where it goes, even though I'm certain I shouldn't. Episode 43 is a Kid episode. Kid is cool, so I like this episode a lot. Here, Kid and Liz seem slightly more exaggerated when it comes to the characters' comedic moments, but not to the point where it's annoying anything, so there's not much of a complaint there. The episode also borrows a concept straight from the manga, so I get to break my own rule again. In the manga, the clowns that the ones in this episode are based on are manifestations of pure fear and madness, basically being birthed from Ashura's madness wavelength. The ones in the anime are just robots, and it kind of makes them less interesting. Like, it wasn't the biggest deal or anything to me, but it's just something to point out. Outside of the kid section, which takes up most of the episode, we see Black Star fighting with the enchanted sword again, which he isn't supposed to be doing, but I guess I'll just have to wait this out and see where it goes. Decent episode overall. Episode 44 is, well, to put it simply, I don't think I've cared less about a Soul Eater episode more than this one. When I genuinely say I do not give a shit about this Marie and Krona plotline, I really mean it. Speaking of Krona, Krona's in this episode and damn near carries. Good job, Krona. Medusa's also in this episode, and I would say she's done well enough too, but one gripe I have, and it may or may not be a meaningless complaint, is that they gave her a sword now. Medusa's usual fighting style is much more entertaining and engaging, so giving her this sword and having her do nothing but swing it around is extremely boring and a poor decision overall. It doesn't even seem like the sword has the properties of any of her other arrows besides stretching. Like, imagine if her sword could have the properties of a vector plate and could act as a way to move herself or her enemy whenever and wherever she wants during the fight. Anyway, this episode is kind of boring overall. Like, they really want me to care about Marie here, but they've given me no reason to care about her in the first place. And Stein is also just gone. And again, I could talk about just how much this upsets me, but it just turned into a rant. And I have a feeling there's already going to be a couple of those later, so I'll save it. Episode 45 was extremely painful and tough to get through. First of all, if Marie could just touch Stein and use her healing wavelength to bring him back, then why didn't she do that at any point before this? It's not even like she didn't have a chance to. They lived together. It's so contrived, and Stein going to Medusa is made to be such a big problem, and it is solved so anticlimactically. And then Maka comes in and just does Genie Hunter again, somehow. She literally says that the first time they did it was pure luck, and then she just does it again. Apparently she figured it out in the 5 seconds she was off screen. Almost everything in this episode is a contrivance and out of place, and I can never really watch the episode for too long without pausing and being confused at what the hell just happened. Like, I don't get how the hell Medusa can interrupt Krona's soul wavelength for so long to the point where multiple minutes have passed in universe and Krona still couldn't harden their blood, when earlier in the series, Stein, one of the strongest characters, couldn't do that when he was fighting Krona. So instead of being bewildered at the fact that Krona might have just fucking died, I'm sitting here asking myself how the hell this even happened in the first place. These aren't even complaints that I have that stem from being a manga reader. These are just problems that come from the anime itself. This is going downhill very fast, and I don't think it's going to get better with these next episodes. Episodes 46 and 47. Baba Yaga Castle is a giant mech. Death City is a giant mech. Black Star is a Super Saiyan. If you are confused about what the hell I'm talking about, you are not alone, cause even I have no idea what the hell is happening anymore. The more I've progressed through these episodes, the more I regret starting this video series. Black Star vs. Mifune 3 is the main event of these episodes, and without even comparing it to the fight from the manga, which is one of the best fights of all time, the anime really shits the bed on this one. The whole thing with Mifune being the one who killed White Star is dumb and unnecessary, especially considering that it was stated early in the anime that the DWMA were the ones who slaughtered the entire Star Clan. It's just a dumb contradiction and a weird way for Mifune to tell Black Star about the path of the demon versus the path of the warrior. Mifune himself is a warrior, so at the very least, have him being the one trying to relate to Black Star, instead of telling a story through Black Star's father, who Black Star doesn't even care about. One thing that I absolutely hate about this fight is that Black Star just brute forces his way into mastering the enchanted sword. It's so generic and predictable and just leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. The very last thing about the fight that upsets me, which might just be the worst thing of the fight in general, is that Mifune gets one shot. After not taking a hit for the entire fight, Black Star gets up, gets a longer red sword, and one-shots Mifune. That's all I have to say about this fight without breaking my rule. I don't like it at all. On the other hand, despite being random as hell, I think the giant mech battle is extremely fun and can't find any real fault with it. Like, the entire scene is just hilarious, especially when Death sticks his finger in the Baba Yaga castle, picks up Ashura, and just eats him. It seems that we're getting to a climax here, and episode 47 was the end of the arc, so we've officially hit the final stretch. Episode 48 is the start of the Kishin battle arc, and all the hope I had that I could say just one more positive thing about the anime has been drained away. This episode is pretty much entirely Lord Death versus Ashura, and this fight is basically the "nuh-uh, fuck you mean nuh-uh" meme. The choreography here is really stiff and uninteresting at some times. Ashura shoots a laser and then Death blocks it with his scythe, and then they just do that a lot. I got extremely bored watching this, and for Lord Death in Spirit to get one shot makes me extremely disappointed. Arachne also gets one shot by Ashura, so everything she's been built up to be amounts to nothing now. Cool. That's pretty much all I have to say about the episode. Also, fuck the anime's version of Kishin Hunt. It's stupid. Episode 49 is bad. Ashura turns into a giant fucking kaiju after eating Arachne's soul for some reason, and now we have our main cast versus a character who is way too powerful for them. Like, I just want to express how little progress these three have made since the anniversary celebration arc, where they were all destroyed by a freshly revived Ashura. Maka only has Genie Hunter now. By the way, she just knows Genie Hunter, no explanation or anything. She can just do it with no trouble. And Genie Hunter isn't even all that good in retrospect. Like, yeah, it killed Medusa, but what will it actually do against somebody who is the very essence of fear and madness? Black Star has mastered the enchanted sword, and he's still doing nothing against Kaiju Ashura, and I'm like 100% sure Kid is still as strong as he was at the beginning of the series. Like, obviously, of course, experience gained over the course of the series and stuff will ultimately lead to getting slightly stronger, but he is literally exactly the same. The only way these three could get any stronger at this point is through Team Resonance and Soul's wavelength control, which they did, and it didn't work. Speaking of Soul, out of nowhere he passes out due to some completely random circumstances that I'm certain don't make sense. I fear for what happens with Soul in the next two episodes, considering he's my favorite character in Soul Eater, and I just know it's gonna be some bullshit. Episode 50. Thank God, I'm almost done. So we got an explanation for what happened to Soul, and it is indeed some bullshit. I'm not even going to attempt to explain exactly what happened because I don't even want to think about it anymore. But just know, it was dumb. Remember how I was saying that Black Star Kid and Maka aren't all that more powerful than they were at the start of the show? Well, guess what? They fixed it in the worst way possible. Black Star is just now all of a sudden able to mix Ashura and cut him, and I guess Bones knew that Kid was virtually the exact same as he was throughout the entire show, because they made him unlock all three lines of Sanzu at the same time. For those who don't know, the lines of Sanzu are the 3 white lines in Kid's hair, and in the manga, yes, I'm breaking the rule again, what are you gonna do about it? Kid's lines connect as he grows older, stronger, and more mature, and by the time the 3rd line connects, he becomes the new Shinigami and the current Lord Death dies. In the anime, Kid gets one shot by Ashura after using Soul Resonance, even though he's already using Soul Resonance, and revives with all 3 lines of Sanzu connected in really, really big death cannons. I don't have words for how dumb this is. Death's mask cracks, and that is all we see from the lines of Sanzu. I know we're not going to see anything else involving them because Kid and Black Star were defeated off screen, and the next episode is the final episode. With that being said, let's just get into it. This has truly been an experience. Episode 51. The end of the Soul Eater anime. Before I go on a rant, I'm going to praise this episode. The animation in this episode was great. What in the fresh hell did I just watch? Let's get the obvious thing out of the way. Weapon Maka is so incredibly stupid. She started fighting unconsciously and her weapon blood activated? By that logic, she should have been popping out scythe blades at random when she was a baby. The worst thing is that Maka didn't even defeat Ashura with her weapon powers, so this is just another weird, useless addition to the anime that makes absolutely no sense. Another thing that bothers me is that Maka uses Kishin Hunt. It would be fine if this was a Maka original technique, but no, it's a pre-established technique from 3 episodes ago when Lord Death used it. Soul also just gets absolutely disrespected throughout the entire episode. Not only is Maka a weapon now, but they recreate the moment of Soul sacrificing himself in their fight with Krona. This moment caused a character arc between the two, which ultimately culminated in both of them agreeing to get stronger together. And in order to pay homage to this moment, the promise they made, and their relationship, they take Soul out of the fight completely. Cool. Ashura is also just insufferable here. His design is so underwhelming and weird, and he looks like a lame mummy, and everything I like about him is gone. Near the end, he just starts whining, and it's such a pathetic display from the guy who's been hyped up for damn near the entire show. And the way he goes out is so stupid. Getting cut by Black Star, blown up by massive death cannons, and cut by Kishin Hunt couldn't take him out, but a punch of courage could. He essentially just gets one shot by Maka. It wasn't even like a metaphorical defeat or anything. He genuinely exploded and died, leaving a soul behind and everything. This is such a weirdly unfulfilling and unsatisfactory way to leave the story that started out so great. So, to answer the question that spawned this entire miniseries, was the Soul Eater anime really that bad? I'd have to say yes and no. Hear me out. Yes, because so many things that were set up in the canon portion either get unsatisfactory endings or are just dropped altogether. There's so much here that kind of becomes generic and cliche to the point where it doesn't feel like Soul Eater anymore. And on the other hand, no, it really isn't that bad because there's so much heart put into this anime. The animation and soundtrack are phenomenal the entire way through, and I can tell that each and every voice actor really gave it their all in order to breathe life into these characters. Basically, if an ending can ruin an entire story for you, then the concrete answer to this question is yes. Of course, I'm not going to leave you guys with the yes and no answer, so unfortunately, I'm going to have to say that the anime's ending disappointed me greatly, and that the Soul Eater anime was really that bad. Thanks for watching.